Hey, everybody. How you doing? Welcome. It is Shadow at Night for Thursday, November the 28th, 2024. A special happy Thanksgiving message to our American friends who are watching the show tonight. And we also have a very inspirational Thanksgiving greeting from the one and only Kamala Harris to show you just a little bit later on in the show tonight. I had a fantastic conversation with the one and only. I say the one and only because he is such a colorful character. And what he did during the lockdown phase and the Freedom Convoy really resonated with a lot of people, considering that he was one of the only politicians, provincial or federal or local for that matter, to come out and say anything at all about the government and what they were doing that was wrong. And he paid the price for it. He's still paying the price for it. But he did have his convoy charges withdrawn at the very least a couple of weeks ago. So we recorded the interview discussion earlier this afternoon. It's 90 minutes long. We've got two parts to play for you. We'll play part one on the social media part of the show tonight, and then part two for the all access members at shadowdavis.com just after 9 o'clock Central tonight in the extension. Let's go say some hellos. Who's watching the show tonight? Marta is watching, paying attention on Vancouver Island. Hello, Marta. Hello, Charlene, watching in Winnipeg. Gerald is watching tonight in St. Adolphe. Dan, Trent in Lloydminster. How you doing? Ellen is watching tonight. Shadow, I'm still not over your show from last night. Mind-boggling. Yeah. If you guys haven't seen last night's show, Ann Diamond is a survivor of the MK Ultra experiments that were held, some of them anyway, here in Canada from 1957 to 1964 at McGill University in Montreal. And she says she's still recovering memories that she lost from when she was 4 years old. She was in that program from the age of 4, turning 5, until she was about 14 or 15 years old, and all of the incredible things that have happened to her since. She's also an author, and she's written some books, half fiction, half nonfiction, regarding her experiences, and some other great stories as well, which you can find at andiamond.ca. But yeah, if you guys didn't get a chance to watch that show last night, please go ahead and check it out. Lots of content for you to check out this weekend if you're not doing anything else. There was 2 hours last night. There was 2 hours the previous night when we had Michelle Wharton on, the vaccine-injured lady living in British Columbia. She is a fantastic person and deserves so much better than what the medical system is providing for her. And there's so many others like this, so many thousands of others like this, just across our country, never mind across the world. And I think the more we speak up about it, the better off we're going to be. And for those of you who still don't believe, and I know there's some people who may be watching this show who go, can't we just get past it already? There's other things. No, because she's still living the nightmare. And until the government says, you know what, we effed up on this one and we're going to help now, there is no help in sight. Michelle has already spent $350,000 getting brain surgery and the diagnosis she needs, even though it's not recognized in Canada. She had to sell her business. She's raising 2 young children. It's a struggle. And like I said, there's many other people like this across the country. So no, we can't just drop it because they can't and they need our help. So speaking up about it is the best thing we can do. Now, that show from Tuesday night was removed from YouTube because they're still not willing to get the truth out there, but it's still up on all the other platforms. So please go ahead and share this week's shows. You know, Catherine Christensen of Valor Legal was on the show for about 10 or 15 minutes on Monday night talking about how the Federal Court of Canada just out of hand rejected this lawsuit that she was presenting to them for over 300 members and former members of the Canadian Armed Forces who were mistreated or injured by you know what. And they don't know whether or not they're going to go ahead with an appeal or not. But yeah, I mean, there's still stuff like this happening all across our country. So we have to remember that. We still have to get the information out there, and we still have to steel ourselves for what is yet to come. And who knows what that might be. So if you guys are watching on Facebook tonight, like and share, get this show out there to as many people as you possibly can. If you're watching on YouTube, smash that like button. Twitch, X, retweet, reshare, whatever it's called. Like, yeah, you guys know what I'm talking about. Share, share, share. Let's get this out there to as many ears as we possibly can. We do have some news items to discuss before we get into the part one with Randy Hillier coming up in just a couple of minutes. The show is brought to you, as always, by CanadaNanoSilver.com. Recover Muscle Cream. If you've been working extra hard, if you turned your head the wrong way, if you sneezed and wrenched your back and your neck at the worst possible moment, this stuff is going to help you out, man. And it doesn't have all the chemicals that stuff in, Shoppers Drug Mart does. Recover Muscle Cream from Canada Nano Silver. Experience the ultimate comfort and relaxation as Recover works its magic. Formulated with cutting-edge technology, our advanced muscle cream provides unparalleled relief, catering to your unique needs. Powered by Silverceutical technology, Recover Muscle Cream is just one of the many awesome products available on the website, CanadaNanoSilver.com. Again, that is CanadaNanoSilver.com. If you're looking for a retail location, you can find one. There's over 30 all across the country. There might be one right next to you, or right across the street, or down the street, or just a couple of blocks over. You never know. Check it out. All the locations are listed on the retail locations tab here on the website, CanadaNanoSilver.com. And if you would like to become a member and retail these products out of your home, you can do that, or your garage, whatever. Make a little extra sheesh on the side. Get a hold of Kevin and Anna through the contact tab at CanadaNanoSilver.com. Again, that is CanadaNanoSilver.com. All right, that vote that just finished up in the House of Commons tonight regarding the GST break, the tax trick that Justin Trudeau is trying to pull on us, passed tonight. It was not a confidence vote. There was a lot of people online saying, oh, there's going to be a confidence vote tonight, and guess what? The NDP might not support Trudeau. And people were getting screwed up and bent out of shape and excited for no good reason. Look, I tell you, when Trudeau is gone, I will be the first to get a group of people together, buy some fireworks, and go have some fun. But that wasn't happening tonight. And the reason for that is because the Liberals decided they were going to split this bill into two. So this is a two-part thing. The first thing is, starting on December 14th, the Liberals want to remove the GST from booze and from junk food and eating out and a couple of other things. And then they want to hand out $250 to everybody who worked in 2023, makes under $150,000 a year. You get $250 free dollars from the federal government. But that part wasn't in the bill because that is a supply motion, which would mean it would be an instant confidence vote. And Jagmeet Singh and the Bloc are both against that. And the reason for that is because it doesn't cover seniors and it doesn't cover people who are disabled. And so the Liberals, knowing they would lose that in a confidence motion, took that out of the bill and just put in the tax freeze part of it. And this is only for two months, remember. So anyway, the holiday consumer relief package, they're calling it, has been split in half. Jagmeet Singh said his party was only ready to help with that part of the bill and not the $250. So anyway, this did pass tonight. And of course, all the political parties are all going against each other, yelling and screaming. Tax trick versus, I thought you were against taxes in the first place. You want to get rid of all the taxes and then you vote against the tax removal bill. Well, there's a difference between getting rid of the carbon tax altogether and a 2-month GST tax trick. That's what Pierre Poilievre's response was and is. And of course, the NDP is going, yeah, we forced the Liberals to do this and we forced, shut up. Just shut up. So this did pass. And I have seen a lot of people saying, hey, guess what? If I take the GST off my grocery bill of $138 on the items that are only covered by this bill, it works out to $1.25. But if you multiply that by 8, because you're spending that much every week at the grocery store, let's say, then you're going to get from this whole thing $12.50. And it's costing Canadians, this whole tax relief package, the first part of the bill, which is the GST being cut for 2 months, $1.6 billion. And then for those $250 checks they want to mail out on April the 1st, that's going to cost another $4.5 or $4.7 billion. And it's going to cost more if the Liberals have to include seniors and people with disabilities. So, yeah. You save $12.50 and maybe get yourself a $250 check. And I'm not sure if they're going to take income tax off that either. They probably will. You get yourself a $250 check and maybe save yourself $15 over the next couple of months. And the government has to borrow $6 or $7 billion, which could cause inflation to rise and interest rates to go up, to try to combat the inflation and blah, blah, blah. Justin Trudeau, it seems, is trying to tank our economy. He's also trying to tank our country, as you guys are probably aware of. And he's been letting people in, for the past 10 years. Just whoever, Roxham Road, maybe they swam across the Red River trying to get here from Minnesota to Manitoba or North Dakota to Manitoba. Maybe they ran the border at Peace Portal Golf Course in White Rock, British Columbia. They came over from Washington State. I don't know how some of these so-called refugees who are coming to Canada from the United States are getting here, but there's more than one way outside of Roxham Road. Well, now premiers are demanding improved border security in response to the threat that Donald Trump made regarding a 25% tariff on Canada and Mexico a couple of days ago. So Trudeau and the premiers convened yesterday to address Trump's pledge to impose this 25% tariff on Canadian imports unless Canada enhances border security. Trump said the tariff would remain in effect until illegal migrants and drugs like fentanyl stop pouring over the border. He says both Mexico and Canada have the absolute right and power to easily solve this long simmering problem. We hereby demand they use this power, and until such time that they do, it's time for them to pay a very big price. He wrote that on his Truth Social account a couple of days ago. Canada exported $439.6 billion worth of goods to the U.S. in 2023, accounting for 76% of our country's total exports. Some of Canada's first ministers highlighted the issues discussed in the meeting. Danielle Smith said that Trump's concerns about illegal migrants and drug smuggling at the Canada-U.S. border were valid. I communicated this very clearly to the Prime Minister and further indicated that Alberta will be acting urgently and decisively to patrol our own border shared with Montana, with more details to be announced soon in that regard, Smith said. I also expressed the need for the federal government to aggressively move up compliance with our country's NATO obligations of a 2% of GDP spend on our military forces, which is yet another concrete way to solidify our economic and military alliance with the United States. Oh, by the way, I understand that new Alberta Bill of Rights passed yesterday, so that opens the door to all kinds of nightmares for Albertans. Smith also used the meeting to discuss the importance of energy security and partnering with the United States, urging the Prime Minister to halt this planned production cap. If the cap remains, Smith plans to invoke the Sovereignty Act to combat the cap. Scott Moe over in Saskatchewan said that most, if not all, of the premiers highlighted the need for more border security to combat illegal drugs and migrants. Moe suggested the Liberals bring in the Canada Border Services Agency and Military Coast Guard to secure the border. He said this could work towards the country hitting its 2% of GDP NATO spending requirement. Some other premiers issued statements confirming they attended the meeting, but were less clear in what specifics they requested from the Liberals and other premiers. For example, Francois Legault in Quebec said he asked the Liberals to provide a detailed plan on how they plan to improve border security. Pierre Poilievre has also called on Trudeau to enhance border security, despite calling the proposed tariff an unjustified threat. Well, unjustified or not, it's still a threat. Around 6 times more terrorists were apprehended between 2022 and 2024 at the Canada-U.S. border compared to the southern border to the United States. The United States shares with Mexico. So now we've got provinces patrolling Canadian borders. That's very interesting. Just like Texas had to do down in the United States when Joe Biden refused to do it. This is governments not wanting to lock down their own borders it's criminal. It's treasonous. It's amazing. What world are we living in exactly? Can somebody please help me out with that one? Don't forget to like and share. The Randy Hillier interview part 1 is coming up in just a second. This is disappointing. One of the things Randy and I talked about this afternoon was how come so many people just don't care? And this is something you and I have talked about for quite some time now. I'm going to say 4 years. Some people don't care. After the last 4 or 5 years, we've discovered what government can and will do left unchecked. They'll lock you down. They will take your business. They'll take your job unless you do a certain thing that they want you to do. They have the power to do that. And people don't want to vote. Maybe they're smart and not dumb. Maybe they understand that whoever's in power, it doesn't matter. They're all going to be the same way anyhow. Voter turnout, maybe that's one thing. That kind of gives you a glimmer of hope as opposed to this despair washing over you that so many people just don't seem to care, right? But voter turnout in this week's provincial election in Nova Scotia hit an all-time low. 45% of the electorate cast a ballot, according to unofficial results from Elections Nova Scotia. The PCs won more seats than any party in the province's history on Tuesday night after calling a snap election last month. Also, the first time voter turnout has dipped below 50% in Nova Scotia. The previous low was in 2017 at 53.4%. That's absolutely astounding. Oh, and the Canada Post strike does not seem to be coming to an end anytime soon. Let's watch.
With no end to the labor disruption in sight, workers today picketed at Canada Post headquarters in Ottawa, expressing growing frustration with a work stoppage now 2 weeks long.
This is an easily solved issue. We've got realistic solutions. Canada Post is holding up the process.
Canada Post today confirmed it's laying off an unspecified number of workers. We've made adjustments to our operations as allowed under the Canada Labour Code, the corporation said in a statement. We can confirm that the layoffs are temporary. Our business has been significantly impacted leading up to and throughout this labor disruption. We have taken steps to adjust our operations. As picket lines continue at postal facilities across the country, the Canadian Union of Postal Workers called the layoffs a scare tactic to rattle striking workers. The job cuts coming after talks between the company and the union broke down when a federal mediator withdrew, saying the two sides are too far apart. The federal labor minister warning that the postal service could be shut down indefinitely.
Both parties don't realize that the business plan and business proposition of Canada Post hasn't changed. That is an obvious fact for all Canadians.
But Steve McKinnon so far refusing to order binding arbitration, as he did this fall to end labor strife at Canada Ports and Railways. The work stoppage is another financial hit for Canada Post, which lost $315 million over the past 3 months. The strike comes at the worst possible moment for the post office and the businesses across the country that rely on it, especially during the holiday season.
Certainly, I would feel badly for people that rely on the post. So in that respect, I would say, yes, it's important for people that need it.
At Christmas time, it's kind of hard for the average person, right? They have to go through the UPS and all that right now, which is more expensive.
Without paychecks, a potentially bleak time for workers too, who say they remain determined to fight for their rights.
The workers are definitely in solidarity with each other. We've seen the lines. They're making do. They're hopeful that we can get a negotiated contract, and that's all our hopes that we have.
Now, caught in the middle of all this are the customers. Canada Post says about 10 million of their packages are currently delayed, and that figure is expected to climb with the Black Friday and Cyber Monday online shopping rush approaching. Glenn McGregor, City News, Ottawa.
Glenn McGregor, don't we hate him? Oh, hate's a strong word. Don't we not like him because of his antics during the Freedom Convoy? Name seems to ring a bell. Part 1 with Randy Hillier, part 1 of the interview with Randy Hillier is coming up in just a second. But before we get to that, I want to play this very special Thanksgiving message from Kamala Harris. And once again, to those of you who are watching in the United States, happy Thanksgiving.
Ever let anybody take your power from you. You have the same power that you did before November 5th. And you have the same purpose that you did.
Okay, that's an AI generated bottle. It's not real, but it's funny. Part one of our Randy Hillier interview begins now.
I was always politically interested. We grew up in a family business, and politics always had impacts on business. But I didn't get involved until I was about 40 years of age.
What were you doing before that?
I was an electrician.
Really? And you just decided at that point, you know what? Never mind. Electricians make good money.
Yeah. Became obvious that government was, getting larger and larger and intruding more and more into our private lives and private properties. And we're taking a track that that I felt would be harmful to my children and myself. So I started writing letters to the editor and opinion pieces, and lo and behold, they actually published them and paid money back then for my thoughts. So I thought, well, that's a pretty good gig. Rant a little bit with a pen and paper, and they'll publish this and give me $500.
Right.
And then it just kept growing, and started the Landowners Association, and our slogan was "Back off government. This land is our land."
Yeah, I want to talk to you about that, because this is something that you and I discussed briefly last week or the week before, whatever. And obviously, this has been a thing that's been repeating all across the country for, I guess, the past 3 or 4 years, and it's recently gotten louder with the advent of the 15-minute smart city. We've got this issue here in the Winnipeg metropolitan region. They just had a meeting on YouTube this morning, these people. Here, what's happened is they've formed a corporation. The government has formed a corporation of unelected, appointed people. I think there's 12 of them. None of them were elected to be on this board. Some of them were elected to be reeves and mayors of the smaller communities around the city. But this corporation is, by law, supposed to be somehow drawing all of the communities and the city of Winnipeg together for one big, huge area. But what people find outrageous about the reasons for it is that they're talking about land density suddenly. They're talking about how you can travel, when you can travel, what you can travel in. They're talking about expropriation of land that seems spurious at best. They don't really give any reasons behind it. And there's all kinds of verbiage from the UN's declaration, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and the equity and the, so we look at this and go, this is an issue. This is huge. We know that Edmonton is going to be Canada's first smart city. I mean, they've got it in the papers now, and they're bragging about it.
Let's not use their verbiage. It's not going to be a smart city, and nobody in it is going to be any smarter as a result of it. This is a centrally planned economy, a centrally planned community, a centrally planned life for the residents in that community. You will have fewer and fewer abilities to make choices for yourself or your family at the end of it, because it will be regulated, controlled through law of where people can live, where people can work, where people can derive their entertainment or their recreation from. And there will be obstacles and roadblocks and obstructions for anybody who doesn't want to meld into the concept of this centralized plan. So there's nothing smart about it. The Russians, the in the USSR had centrally planned economies and communities long, long ago. And we knew what the result of their actions are.
Does this go back, Randy? I mean, you formed the Ontario Landholders Association for a reason, obviously. You wanted the government to back off. Did you see signs of this even back then in the early 2000s?
Oh, absolutely. It was outrageous. And it was, the rural areas were very, very much, and still are, under a direct threat to the centralized planners. Rural people aren't dependent on the bureaucracy for our water. We have our own private wells. We're not dependent on the government for our transportation. We have all our own individual transportation. Same with our septage. We're not connected up to a pipe. We have our own septic beds. The governments do. For governments to grow, they require people to surrender their self-reliance and their independence and become dependent on the state for an ever-increasing number of functions or desires of the individual. And
What's your take on property taxes? I've been mulling about this for the past while now, and when all this talk about Trudeau taking the GST off for a couple of months on junk food and booze, which is a trick, in my opinion, like Polyev says. But property taxes, they're constant, they're ongoing on something that you've already purchased. And since when do we have to keep paying tax on something we already own? We've already bought it.
Well, the concept behind it is that the municipalities need some way to fund how to plow the roads, how to pick up the garbage, how to fill in the potholes or put some new gravel down. So there has to be some way of raising that funds. Our Constitution provides direction on how the provincial government can raise taxes and how the federal government can, but it's quiet. Municipal governments don't exist in our Constitution. However, there has to be some means to do it. And different jurisdictions do funding for municipal governments in different ways. I've seen some where they have a property tax is levied on the unimproved value of the lot. So regardless if you built a mansion on it or a hunt camp, the rate of taxation is based on the value of the land, not the improved value of the land. We've seen other jurisdictions have a poll tax where, how many people live there, and that's so there has to be some way to provide those services. And I don't think it is the mechanism of taxation that is really that is the problem, more so than the absolute squandering and wasteful use of the money that all governments get in. We see municipal governments here, as I'm sure you do, funding all kinds of projects. Interval House, the local climate change initiative, the Pride Parade. They're shoveling money out the door to special interest groups and others. And maybe if they stopped squandering our money and funding pet projects and ideological projects that serve as a detriment to society, our taxation, property tax would be much, much lower.
Randy, what's your thought on getting people motivated? I mean, here we are, we're 4 or 5 years into this nightmare, at least as far as I can see, since the beginnings of COVID-19. And yet there are still people out there who won't vote. They won't go to the polls. They won't, not for any election, municipal, probably the most they have disdain for. But why is that? I mean, are they just not, they don't care enough? It's not a big enough deal for them after everything they've seen that governments can do these past few years?
Well, first off, there's a big bucket. We've got 40 million people in this country now. And 4 million of them here illegally. But if we started to look at some of the segments, there are a great number of people who are deriving handsome and unearned benefits from government. They don't see government as a problem. If you're one of the approximately 4 million people employed by the public service who are getting a handsome paycheck every week, get lavish holiday pay and sick pay and benefits, and get a very handsome pension at the end of it all for doing very little often, government is not a problem for them. Then there are those other people who, I would say two big categories is one group of people who believe that all the parties are the same, and it doesn't matter which one you elect. And there is some truth to that. Obviously, if you're only looking at the establishment parties, you're absolutely correct. You're going to trade one puppet for another puppet. You're going to one corrupt red player for a different corrupt blue player, and they have opted out of the system. And then there's also a large group of people, that I would say are just don't care. Don't care until they themselves become affected and impacted. And that's what we saw. A great number of people in the 2021 election come out to vote for the first time. But unfortunately, I would say the level of mainstream and social media suppression and censorship on any COVID dissenters or anti-jab messaging, it got very, very difficult for any dissenting voices to be heard, and I would say a lot of Canadians were totally unaware that there was choices in 2021 that would have made a big difference.
Interestingly, what you just talked about regarding the censorship happened just the other night. I had a vaccine injured woman called Michelle on the show, and she was talking about her life since the injury occurred. And it's nightmarish. She had to sell her business. She had brain surgery now for a cyst. That's all been caused by this COVID vaccine, as diagnosed by doctors in the United States. And YouTube took it down for medical misinformation.
Yeah.
Which I found appalling. So they're still doing that.
Oh,
when you were in government, let me ask you this. What was the mood like when this thing started breaking, when COVID started happening? Was it panic? Were there people who were on your side of things but were too scared to speak out? What was that like?
So there's some time frames that are important to put in with that question, I think. One is, for the first couple of weeks, I would say 100% of the people were completely uncertain and had grave doubts and of just what was going on. For myself, within a few weeks, you could see that whether or not there was a real pandemic or not, what was really real, what was measurable, was the harm that we were doing to people with the lockdowns. That came very early. People not being able to get healthcare services, people being isolated, confined, and essentially scared to death. And what we were doing in our long-term care facilities and hospitals was just, I would say it was a premeditated act of murder, in my view. Like, we knew when you crammed these long-term care facilities with pushing people out of the hospitals and into them, we knew any reasonable person would know that this would be a catastrophe in the making. But for myself, it was pretty obvious within a few weeks that the fears had been exaggerated, that that the dangers were manifestly without any evidence at all. That you could catch COVID by taking a walk on a nature trail, or you could catch COVID by touching an apple in the, you know, and there was others that shared my view in the political realm, but they were too fearful of both the backlash from the public and the backlash from their political parties that they chose to remain silent, and have done so to this day. I know a great many people in the political system, elected representatives, who shared my views, but refused to face. They were cowards, and they did not want to be leaders. And there were. Let's not forget, though, that there was also a great many people profiting from this counterfeit pandemic.
Doug Ford profited a great deal, from what I understand.
Minuscule, he did, but compared to David Thompson, the richest man in Canada, who owns Thomson Reuters, who owns so much of our media, owns the Reuters fact checkers, and Galen Weston, who owns Shoppers Drug Mart, and charging for every jab and every visit to the pharmacies and stuff. The money that Ford and others made is, in the millions. We're talking billions of dollars, and that's not even counting the big ones, like Moderna and Pfizer, Amazon, Walmart, Costco. Let's shut down every retail business there is, except the biggest players. And that's who government serves. A lot of people are still under this view that our government is, for the people, by the people, of the people. Well, no, it hasn't been that way since Gettysburg, in my humble opinion, or maybe shortly afterwards. The governments serve those who have the greatest amount of money. And that's not you or I, and it's not the people listening to this show.
That sounds like a George Carlin bit from 10, 12 years ago, or before he died. I can't remember when that was, but yeah, it's a big club and you ain't in it.
No.
Do you think things would have been different, could have been different, if the people who knew that this whole thing was a scam would have spoken up and would have said, look, we don't mind? And that's the thing. I mean, we got pasted as anti this and anti that, and next thing you know, we're racists and bigots, when all we were doing was asking questions. Like, how can you develop a vaccine so quickly for a novel virus, one that you don't apparently understand yet? And just by asking that question, you were smeared and shouted down and othered. But if people had the strength to stand up against that, which I find that more and more people seem to be gaining these past few months, couple of years, do you think things could have been different?
Oh, absolutely. And they would have been. Like, I know of at least a dozen colleagues in the Conservative caucus who either were full on side with my view, or were significantly suspicious of what was happening. Instead, I was on my own. I was the only voice speaking in the wilderness until about 6 months later. Then one other came out. And then a year later, one more came out. Had they had the courage at the beginning, it could have easily been stopped, because had we had those dozen people in Ontario who I know, like I said, shared my views, well, then that would have been a significant voting bloc within the House, and the media, it's much easier to tarnish and try to tarnish and discredit one individual than discrediting 12 individuals.
Were there conversations with these people who had strong suspicions that you had?
I had lengthy conversations with Doug Ford's staff at the end of April in early May, and they all understood that that they too had been duped. Okay, there's no question. There may be some elected people who knew it was a skank from the beginning and said nothing, but most, I would say 99% of elected members in Canada fell into that they were duped. But when I had conversations in April and May with Doug Ford's staff, they knew by that time that they had done wrong. But like every good bureaucracy, every good government, you can never admit error for fear of backlash from the public as well. And by that time, the frenzy, the Canadian population had been turned into a frenzied mob that could not be easily convinced that it wasn't a pandemic. They were glued to their television sets every day, looking at new case counts and looking at these exaggerated death rates where somebody who was drunk and had a head-on collision, and they did an autopsy on him after, and they found that there was a fragment of COVID in him, and he's a COVID death. Not that he was a drunk driver and ran headlong into a rock cliff. So people were gripped, and that's what fear does. The phrase, caught in the headlights. You're gripped and you can't think rationally. But fear is supposed to be a very momentary and very temporary period of time, and we had people gripped into fear for a couple of years.
Oh, even more, even still. I mean, yesterday I saw half a dozen people still walking around with these stupid face masks on. It's gotten to the point now where I will actually stop somebody and say, what do you think that is doing for you, aside from making you look like an idiot?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I'm there at that stage of the game right now where I'm going like, what are you doing? You're asphyxiating yourself.
Listen, I just get it as nice and as close as I can to them. And that's it.
Or maybe you play around with them a little bit and say, asked one of them a question. One of them yesterday, he was a clerk at a supermarket I go to, and you get up to him and you say, hey, is there a sale on these things? I'm sorry, I can't hear you. And I can't hear you. Can you take that freaking thing off your face so I can hear you? They get the wild eyes and they walk away. Hey,
listen, the businesses, how many businesses still have plexiglass shields up? Surely they would, a reasonable, intelligent individual operating a retail store would have said, okay, this, I don't have to do this anymore. I don't have to have the mask on. I don't need to have the plexiglass up. Let's go back to being normal. As much as we point the fingers, and we ought to point the fingers at the politicians, it's more important, I believe, to point the fingers at the corporate robber barons who were engaged in this, as well as the entrenched administration. But let's not deflect that or absolve all the stupid people.
Yeah.
And
what do you think should be done, Randy? I mean, we talk about, there's a lot of people who say forgive and forget, move on, it's past. But, in my conversation with Michelle a couple nights ago, the vaccine injured woman, you can't, because these people are still suffering greatly from everything that's been put on them and falling through the cracks in terms of medical attention. She can't even get doctors in British Columbia where she lives to look at her because of her injuries and the way they've been diagnosed in the United States. They won't even touch it.
So I met a lady yesterday. She's about 87. One of her friends has a daughter who's 9 years old. It was requiring significant medical attention. And the Children's Hospital of Eastern Ontario will not treat her or see her because she's not vaccinated still. Now, these are, but I'll go back. Like, I did a series of about a dozen interviews between June and August, I believe it was 2020, of people who had family members die suddenly or have significant injuries shortly after getting the vaccine. Actually, Facebook still has those videos up. They were censored off YouTube. They were censored off Twitter, but for some reason, Facebook allowed them to come up. But in 1 week, I put out a call. Is there anybody getting? Who else is getting injured or feeling that there's some side effects to these things? I had over 3,000 emails that week, but only a dozen of them would appear on to do a live interview with me. Shadow.
They were scared?
Everybody else was too scared. Out of 3,000, I got 12 people to, and even at that, I had to somewhat obscure. I would only use their first name, and I would only use the province where they lived, not their town or last name. But that, like that speaks volumes to me when, out of 3,000 people who, these are serious, Guillain-Barré syndrome, clots, paralyzation, death in their families. And they refuse to speak and inform and warn others of the very dangers that they were facing. Now, so what's the greater tragedy? And I say this, like, what is the greater tragedy? The people refusing to warn their neighbors and their friends and their family members for fear of ostracization, or the politicians and the pharma who knowingly were administering something that was not proven to be either safe nor effective.
They're still doing it. It's not mandated any longer, but they're still doing it. You still see public health officials coming on screens, whether it's social media or television, saying, have you gotten your new COVID-19 updated vaccination yet? Like, what
we have
are you? A
few states like Florida, Lapido, Surgeon General Lapido has indicated that they will not. They have informed people that it is too risky to take these things. Interestingly enough, that's the same state that is now also warning people not to have fluoride in their water as well.
Interesting, isn't it?
And this has been going on for a long time. Why do we put fluoride in our water? Because there are others who are making money off your poor health, your illnesses, and we've been doing this for quite some time. The bonus of COVID is that it has finally awoken many people up to just how nefarious and corrupt our system, this machine that we call democracy, actually is to people.
Can you walk us through the time that you first started speaking out about all of this in the Ontario government, and right up till the time where you were dismissed, where you were fired out of caucus? Were you given significant warnings? How many times were you warned? How were you treated by other people, bureaucrats, other elected representatives? Was it difficult?
So I knew that this was a difficult, that this was going to be a difficult journey, and I thought I could probably get it accomplished within a couple of years. I didn't think this was a short term, and that I knew I was going to have to take some bruises on this one. But so I took a very gradual approach. First I started talking out against the state of emergency. And the lockdowns, the harm that the lockdowns were causing, and also stating that we now knew what we were dealing with, and there was no requirement for the legislature to be closed and to abdicate all our legislative authorities over to public health. So that was a difficult thing for the media to challenge me on too much or to discredit me. But it was, and then I started getting into the where it really came, where they went after me big time is when I started doing live interviews at my house with doctors and others, beside one another on the front porch, like 2 feet away, doing
Without a mask.
without a mask. And showing, I was attempting to show people that there was nothing to be fearful of, and that I would never ask somebody to do something that I was not prepared to do. So that really started. The OMA was one of the first ones. The Ontario Medical Association was one of the first ones to come after me with petitions and calling for my removal from the legislature. When I went after the mask mandates, because again, that was foolhardy. An elementary school science, grade 5 science kid would know that a mask doesn't stop a microscopic virus that is smaller than the weave in the mask. And
by 100 times, at least.
Yeah.
Crazy.
And the whole, I went after the whole notion, like, you can't be social if you're distanced. Like that's a bullshit phrase. This wasn't, that lockdowns were a term to use in prisons, not in a free society. So I went after, in all this bullshit. Well, my mask protects you, your mask protects me bullshit. Like that's, so when I went after the mask, that's when also the local public health unit went after me, as well as the municipal governments in my riding all passed resolutions to censor me and remove me. And of course they really went crazy when I with the No More Lockdown rallies. I hosted, we had No More Lockdown rallies throughout the province. I received a multitude of fines and charges on those. I'm still fighting a number of them. And then of course, when I started putting out those videos about vaccine injuries, or suspected or probable vaccine injuries. And of course, I did all kinds of other things. I sent letters to the OPP demanding that they open up a criminal investigation into these sudden and unexpected deaths. I used
look what Helen Bruce in Ottawa did. The Ottawa police officer who was investigating the death of the babies there. I mean, she's been on trial for 2 years now.
Yeah. But that was, so I had sent I think it was in September or October of 2021, because the jab came out in January or February of 2021. And it was obvious. I got my first wind of people dying in May of 2021. by September, October, I had plenty of credible evidence that something was going on, and asked the RCMP, the local municipal police, and the RCMP to launch an investigation into this. Helen, I think, got she got. When did they lay the? I think they laid the charges against her just prior to the convoy. I think in January of 2022. But it was evident to anybody that was awake and alert and was somewhat knowledgeable that we were killing people.
Yeah. If you drop anybody in from outer space, let's say they've been out in outer space for 2 years and they come back to all of this nonsense, these would be the obvious questions they would be asking. Why are you wearing that thing on your face? What are you doing taking this thing? Why are you accusing this woman of a crime? All she's trying to do is find out what's going on.
Yeah.
But
others are saying the same thing. So, like, she had ample credible evidence to support her investigation, and who ought to be under police conduct tribunals is every one of the other 3,000 Ottawa police officers who were negligent and failed in that duty.
Speaking of Ottawa, when the convoy was announced, when you first heard about this, did you have hope at that stage of the game? Was it like, all right, man, we're finally starting to fight back here. People from all across the country are coming out?
I knew eventually we would win. And so for the prior 2 years, I was involved in all these no more lockdown rallies where we were building up interest. The first rallies that I had, Shadow, were, I may have had 50 or 60 people at them. But we kept doing them. And we did them in other communities around the province. And then we were into the hundreds and the 500s and the thousands of people coming out to these rallies. So I knew this from my days in the landowners, that you have to take the time to build up people's confidence and courage and motivation, because typically people don't want to be confrontational. People want to be law-abiding. People want to be to get along with one another. So it takes, that's our natural state, and we have to. But as more and more harms came, and more evidence came out that what we were doing was wrong, and as more and more protests were happening, and I'm just talking about Ontario, but that these protests were happening from coast to coast in 2020 and 2021, and it just so happened that the announcement of the jab on truckers became the catalyst to take up all that built up motivation and all that built up confidence to now have a singular event for everybody to come out of the woodwork. And it was very successful. Like every provincial government, every government in this country announced an end to the mandates while we were in Ottawa. Every one of them.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Justin Trudeau had created a false narrative of an attempted overthrow and an insurrection of fascists, and he had used exceptionally vile, insightful, inflammatory language to describe freedom protesters. And
let me ask I'm going to stop you there for 1 second.
Yeah.
Let me ask you were there. I mean, you had your charges recently withdrawn from your convoy charges anyway. They were withdrawn. Congratulations on that, by the way. Sorry you're still fighting these other ones, but I'm happy to hear that they've withdrawn your convoy charges. What did you see when you were there?
the only thing anybody could see there was exuberance, exhilaration, the most joyful, fun-filled display of happiness and friendliness, and never in my I don't think we will ever see another display of such exuberance and friendliness and joy in our nation's capital. Like, this was an event that would be breathtaking for anyone, and we can know that's true, Shadow, because not only did it inspire our nation, it inspired the world to end the COVID madness. It motivated and inspired people across the world to end the madness of COVID.
Did you see conservative MPs in Ottawa quietly maybe giving tacit support to the protesters? Because I've seen pictures of Andrew Scheer, even Pierre Poilievre, even though at that time they weren't really speaking out about it. I guess they were trying to be politically safe. But I have seen pictures from some of the convoy people. They just sent me in the last couple of months.
So let me give you my insight on this. For
yes,
what it's
please.
For a large portion of time, when I was in Ottawa, I stayed at the Marriott Hotel, which is very, very close to Parliament Hill. And it just so happens a lot of conservative MPs who come from out of town and rent a hotel for the week while they're in the in Parliament also rent rooms from the Marriott Hotel. And being who I am, and I met quite a number of conservative MPs and talked to them at length. None of them would show any public support. There was pictures taken, sure, because, when they get caught on the side of the road and somebody recognizes them and there's a truck beside them, and then somebody says, and they'll pay some minor lip service of support, and people will take pictures. But the word from the party was that they cannot show any public support for the convoy. There was that one conservative senator, I forget his name offhand, but he got ostracized. He actually stopped on Wellington Street and engaged with somebody and had a conversation and said, I think these people there's some merit to what they're saying and there's some justification here, and we should be listening to them. Well, he was condemned right away by the party and the media, and of course put out a retraction the following day. So there were some pictures taken, but there was no demonstrable support from any federal politician. All 338 of them would have been preferred. They would have preferred to be like Justin Trudeau and be stricken by COVID and be hiding in the cottage again rather than be seen.
All right. So that's it for part one of the Randy Hillier interview. In part two, we go a little bit deeper. He talks about Pierre Poilievre. He talks about Justin Trudeau. And he talks about the people behind these political parties and how we might be able to get around them. What's establishment? What's not? We also talk about Donald Trump. Is he for real or is he just part of the machine? Part two of the Randy Hillier interview is coming up in the extension for all access members at shadowdavis.com. So if you're not an all access member at shadowdavis.com, go now and become an all access member at shadowdavis.com. tariffs.com. There is no show tomorrow night, you guys, but you have over 6 hours of content to go through over the weekend. Monday night show, over an hour. Tuesday night show, and I'm not even talking about all access now, just what's available on all the social media. Tuesday night show was 2 hours. Last night's show was well over 2 hours, and it all appears on the social media. So you have a lot of catching up to do if you haven't seen it all. And last night's show with Ann Diamond, who is an MK Ultra survivor, may seem a little bit scattered. It's a very long conversation. We cover so many different things, but please remember, and I've seen a couple of negative comments about her that kind of upset me. Please remember what she went through as a child from the age of 5 through 14. If you don't know what MK Ultra is or was, go look it up. Go and see some of the things they would do to people, the torturous things they would do. Electrodes, 40 or 50 times as strong as being zapped by an outlet, let's just say, attached to your temples. Verbal and sexual abuse, water tortures, sleep deprivation, the use of very heavy drugs, chemicals, all designed to remove your memories and in some cases even implant new ones. So that's what she went through. So for anybody who thinks that Anne is kind of crazy, and she even admits herself she's, but she doesn't care anymore. She lives her life. You got to understand what she's been through before you can make a statement like that. Go check out that interview from last night. It is truly amazing, some of the things that she brings up and points out. Part 2 of the Randy Hillier interview coming up in the extension on shadowdavis.com in 2 minutes. I love you all. I appreciate you all, and I will see you soon. Bye for now.